one of the things that I look for every day is promoting Filipino martial arts and culture. Arnis is a way to realize that the impacts of colonization runs deep. It's very difficult to set a physical boundary if someone's in your face. One thing that we teach is learning how to be assertive. My late Lola, in her town, she would be considered one of the town faith healers. Sometimes when I do it to friends or students who ask me, can you please look at something? You can feel where in their body that you feel that the energy point is kind of stagnant. When things are stagnant, like I was just saying, you can feel it. Some people get headaches. Some people have issues with their heart. I want to hike Mount Banahaw. My Lola would always talk about caves and mountains in the Philippines hold a spiritual significance.
Sa inyong lahat, welcome to the Cherie Mercado Podcast. And today we're going to get to know JB Ramos. Hi, JB.
Hello.
Okay, so these are some facts about you that I've gathered, and we can talk about them one by one so that people can get to know you at the same time as I'm getting to know you. So you're the owner and head instructor at Combat Science Warrior Arts of Asia, and this is based here in Toronto, Canada. You're a certified trauma-informed self-defense instructor and world champion martial artist. Focuses on Filipino martial arts, specifically Arnis, Kali, and Eskrima. You hold the title of Senior Master in Filipino Martial Arts. So let's talk about that aspect first.
Sure.
How did you get into it?
Arnis, Filipino martial arts.
Just martial arts in general.
Wow, that's a good question. I guess it could be rooted going back to a couple of things. My dad would always talk about his upbringing in doing taekwondo when he was studying in the police academy in the Philippines.
Oh, so your dad's a police officer, was a former police officer?
In the Philippines. Pero when he immigrated to Canada, he wasn't able to continue it. But my brother is a police officer here. So it kind of ran within growing up. Another thing that I remembered about how my interest was to learn the Filipino martial arts kasi ang lola ko, she would always talk about her dad mimicking the movements in their farm up in Tarlac using a rattan stick. But for them, they never really considered it a sport, but more of a way of life. So my interest in learning about these things kind of rooted from my family upbringing.
So it's an interesting story that I'm just imagining the stories of your Lola. You were saying her father, so your great-grandfather, would use the stick that what do we call the stick? Do we call it arnis, or arnis is the sport itself?
Yeah, arnis, Kali, Eskrima would be considered the umbrella terms under the Filipino martial arts. Pero you can call it yantok. Some people would call it a cane, some call it a stick. So depending on what your system is, then that's what you call it. I call it an arnis stick.
Kasi nung panahon ng great-grandfather mo, like you were saying, it was their way of life because they had to defend themselves. You were saying your great-grandfather had a farm, so I'm assuming there's always threat to property. Well, even until now, but way back the situation were different. Plus, those were the times maybe of the world wars, and we were being colonized, or our territories were forcefully being taken away from us. And they were saying that the Filipinos were the best warriors. In Asia, of course, that would be relative. I mean, a lot of the other races will probably take us up on it. But yeah, what in Arnis, Kali, and Eskrima should we know to relate it to our history and our roots as Filipinos?
That's a good point. The one thing that we teach when we teach Arnis is that Arnis is a form of resistance, just like you were talking about, because of how our ancestors had to protect their family, their property, and keep their loved ones safe. So keeping that in mind, that was one thing that we always talk within our classes to make it an important fact for the next generations to know the roots and why Arnis, Kali, Eskrima, or Filipino martial arts was developed.
So bakit may tatlong terms? Like for us, what do we
call it?
Just call it.
Depending on which part of the Philippines you are, north, south, central is the term that use. So Arnis tends to be more of Luzon. Visayas would be Eskrima, and Cali would be south.
And how did we interpret this now in the modern times?
Interpret Arnis or the Filipino?
Yung pagturo ng Filipino martial arts from way back when our ancestors used to use it as a way of life, as a way to defend themselves, and now we're teaching it to the younger generations. What is your focus, your goal now in teaching it to younger Filipinos, and maybe not just Filipinos, right? Your school takes all kinds of ethnicities.
Yeah, when I first started, it was kind of different. I was focusing more on myself, but when I transitioned to being a teacher and promoting it with the school, the progression from just learning the art and competing had more meaning to me because of trying to find my roots. So during pandemic, I found that a lot of next generations wanted to know more about our culture, let alone not only just Filipinos, but also those non-Filipinos finding an interest in things that a lot of mainstream are just starting to pick up on. I found that a lot of movies are starting to utilize techniques within their fight choreography and incorporating the movements of the Filipino martial arts. So it's pretty fascinating how I would have to say the last 5 years that both Filipinos, those trying to find out more about their cultural roots, and those who are not Filipinos finding it pretty cool seeing FMA, within mainstream media.
There are two things there that I want to unpack. The first thing is when you said this is when you started teaching. So I wanted to know your frame of mind when you were learning it for yourself. Like, what was the situation then with you? Why did you want to learn how to do this, to do Filipino martial arts? And the second one would be when you said, movies employ this in their fight choreography. I remember my daughter was just telling me that she doesn't see a lot of Filipino representation in media, and even in a country as diverse as Canada, we still don't see, we see diversity in TV shows and in film. Not a lot of Filipinos still. Like, we see colors, different colors, but in terms of Filipino representation, there's still a lot of shortages in that aspect. In the martial arts scene, do they know that this comes from the Filipino culture? So that's two things. Let's start first with yourself, your journey and your personal journey with martial arts.
I guess let's relate it to my journey finding more about the Filipino martial arts. So when I first found out about Arnis I was at that time studying Taekwondo at the Santos Martial Arts for a number of years. I got my black belt in that, and before that I was also studying Okinawan karate. So I always had that urge to want to know something, and something had that thing inside of me that I was looking for something. I had no idea what it was. So martial arts movement, and I found that healing because it helped me connect with myself and be comfortable within my own body. And I think a lot of youth going through high school transitioning, being a person of color, Filipino in a lot of communities at that time, you've had to deal with bullying and all those kind of things. So I found martial arts helped me get through a lot of those things. So how I came into learning about Arnis was at the Taekwondo school. We had a guest instructor come in and do a special class workshop promoting Arnis because they wanted to start their own school. And her name is Laura Armstrong. She is the founder of Combat Science and my mentor in the FMA. So I was studying, let's go back a bit. I was studying Taekwondo. She came and did a workshop. And since then, when she pulled out the Arnis sticks and started doing these intricate movements with these two rattan sticks I've never seen before, I was hooked. Something just lit a light bulb and a fire inside that I just wanted to know more. And it was kind of like a reconnection to something that I was looking for all my whole life. Although I did Filipino Sunday class, learning about Tagalog, understanding about basic history sa Pinas, those kind of things. But it wasn't until I saw that. That was it. I knew I was in love.
Iba yung tama, no? Iba yung dating.
Iba.
There's something. These are the intangibles, no? Na, like what you said, you're exposed to all other things, but when you see something, parang ang love at first sight yan, ano? Parang,
Totoo.
so many women walking, but like there's this one particular person that you feel differently for. So it's the same thing for
Yes.
for our niece. Wow, that's kind of profound there. But like, because you weren't born in the Philippines,
Hindi.
dito ka na pinanganak. So
Oo.
there's also that yearning for you to learn your roots. Did you find it through Filipino martial arts?
I found that and more. Our niece, as I guess when we talk about our niece and kind of the things that I teach in collaboration with Adhika, and we could talk about Adhika in a little while, some other organizations in the Philippines like U Drive Group. Our niece is a form of resistance to, being colonized for centuries. And when you think about that, and intergenerational trauma and how that's passed on from generation to generation, being able to unpack all that through physical movement is healing. So I found that a lot of people attending the special workshops that we do find that it helped a lot of them to understand Filipino culture and also their journey to where they are now. So it's pretty interesting because conversations come up to unpack all of that, and they don't realize it until you start holding the RNE sticks and learning about colonization and how that relates to us as a Philippine culture.
But the woman you learned it from, and you're saying your mentor, Laura
Armstrong.
So she's not even Filipino when she got into her knees. That's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. So kind of like her, she was studying with different art forms, Aikido, Western boxing, holistic healing, Reiki, those kind of things. But when she was trying to find a place to do something different, I think she also at that time had a guest instructor do a workshop in Filipino martial arts. And from that moment on, she just fell in love with it because something just sparked an interest in her. So it seems like no matter what gender you are, what nationality you are, as long as you see that certain spark, that's you're just kind of hooked, right? And it's kind of difficult to explain if you have not felt that before. But when you do, you see a lot of students' eyes light up when they do it, especially people doing it for the first time.
So when it comes to that other question of mine regarding, do you think Filipino martial arts is gaining ground in terms of people getting to know about it? This particular fight scene in the movie that I saw actually has Filipino roots, because we're just yearning for that representation in media. And if it should rightfully be credited to us, or at least people would be enlightened to know that this is rooted in the Filipino culture.
I think a lot of the fight scenes that are based around FMA, or Filipino martial arts, a lot of people don't know that it actually is derived from the skills because they make that assumption that Filipino martial arts is solely just stick fighting. And it actually translates into knife, empty hand, improvised weaponry. But I think the mainstream media just makes that basic assumption that it's about stick fighting because the bladed weaponry, a lot of other art forms also teach that as well.
Let's talk a little about your background, your childhood. It's very interesting. You said your brother is a police officer here in Canada. Your father used to be a police officer in the Philippines. What type of household did you grow up in? What kind of childhood did you have?
Oh, it was a very interesting household, intergenerational. We had my Lola there helping raise us because my parents were too busy working, in the 70s, newcomers adjusting to life in Canada, raising a young family. They came here in their early 20s. So, and that was in the 1970s. That was kind of like the second wave of Filipino immigrants coming to Canada. And, having it being intergenerational was pretty good. You had a lot of people, just like newcomers here, having like cousins live with you because they're just trying to form their life and build their own communities. And I think that hasn't changed much since then. But in terms of my upbringing with my dad having a police and security background, it was good because he normalized being familiar with what people would consider a weapon. For me, it depends on how you're raised and how you were taught to respect certain things, that you wouldn't look at it as a toy or something to hurt people. Mind you, you know that it can, such as guns, knives, sticks. Your perception of the object will definitely change if you give it a certain form of respect, right? So growing up where it was normalized, it wasn't really something that I found very unfamiliar because
Sensitive or fearful.
Exactly, because I was already exposed to it at such a young age.
How many siblings did you have? So you have one brother.
And a younger sister, so I'm right in between.
You're right in the middle.
Yeah.
You decided, what is teaching martial arts your full-time job?
It's kind of like 50-50. I have a day job in an office, just like a regular person. But once that day job, I clock out, I do the other job, which is, teaching Filipino martial arts and, workshops around trauma-informed self-defense as well.
What's your day job? What's the other thing you do?
I work at an organization that deals with financial advisors to get certifications in Canada. So for them to get their different credentials and stuff.
Nice. That's a good combination. The other one's very tactile, very physical. And the other one's mental, I suppose, no, and knowing. So that kind of balances it out. And I suppose, how's that? This is the one that brings most of the money, and then the other one is, or it's also a lucrative. Is learning martial arts and teaching it also a lucrative job?
Oh, yes. I mean, when you build partnerships with different organizations looking to incorporate these kind of programs and offer it within their groups, and it actually does spread out. So a lot of community organizations looking for ways to promote safety also reach out to our school to learn more about it. And also, I would say, I guess, groups that deal with marginalized populations, wanting to provide workshops to help keep them safe, learn how to set boundaries, what are different self-defense techniques. Those kind of things are where people tend to reach out to our school because they want to be able to have access it for people who don't know where to go and don't know where these workshops would be available.
So tell me the difference with what your school teaches, for example, especially nowadays, like what you said earlier. If you come from a different race, okay, Canada at least is we're known to be an inclusive nation, but there's a lot of people watching us who are not even from Canada, who are, might be actively experiencing discrimination or the need to defend themselves. They go home at night, they commute. Lately, there's been news of, gang rapes with teenage girls, just from 12 to 18 years old. It's really very difficult to read and listen to. But like parents who have daughters, for example, or even the parents themselves, how do we arm ourselves? And what can you tell these people who read about these things, feel that their lives are in danger every time they commute, or maybe not even that intensity? Like sometimes you just use the public transportation every day, but every now and then there would be, certain instances where you don't feel safe, maybe just for a few minutes, but your message to us who feel that way.
Oh, for sure. I guess one main thing that a lot of people tend to do is not really pay attention to their surroundings and awareness. A lot of people are locked on their cell phones 24/7, so their tunnel vision is strictly looking down, so they don't really know what's going on. And another thing that I found that would be most beneficial is for people to trust their instinct. We have a gut, and a lot of people kind of like tend to analyze their feelings before they trust their instinct. And when they say gut, the gut is part of our animal instinct. That's one thing you should always trust. You know how when you go into a room, something doesn't feel right, but you try to rationalize in your mind, oh, that's okay, the light's on, but then something isn't right if you walk in the door. So when people use their thinking brain towards what they're feeling, that's where the conflict is, right? So I think one of the things that we teach when we teach trauma-informed self-defense, I'm also an empowerment self-defense certified instructor. We teach 5 main principles, which are think, yell, run, fight, tell. And
which one is it? What is that?
5 principles of self-defense. ESD, Empowerment Self-Defense, is an internationally known organization that teaches instructors to be able to provide trauma-informed self-defense globally. So there's instructors all over the world that teach these kind of things to avoid victim blaming, to avoid fear-mongering, unlike traditional self-defense instructors that tend to teach just the physical, like we were talking about, right?
Right.
So the majority of assaults tend to be with people that people close to you, could be coworkers, friends, family, those kind of things. And the majority of things that people tend to see in the media would be things against stranger danger, right? But to be able to have options, not only with boundary setting, trusting your instinct, physical skills should be, of course, one of the things that you would need to do when things tend to escalate.
So what you're saying here basically is it's not just the physical skills.
Mm-hmm.
So the other things would be your instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And what else should we? What does it? What else are the other things apart from
Instinct,
instinct?
using your voice, a lot of
Scream.
scream, setting your boundaries, right, and knowing what they are. One big thing, I guess,
Setting your boundaries. Okay,
within our culture, we don't really do that. We're always people pleasing, diba?
that's true.
So, and always saying yes.
Intrinsically, that would be hard for us already. That would be a challenge.
Exactly. And where do you think that stemmed from? Right, being people pleasing.
I don't know. From being colonized. Mm-hmm.
And you can see how all of this is all intertwined and connected, whether it be teaching trauma-informed self-defense. And our niece is a way to realize that the impacts of colonization runs deep, right? And boundary setting is one of them that's kind of passed on generation to generation. For example, I've taught workshops with Adhika as well as UDrive Group. My co-facilitator there is Poy Delara. We have discussions within Filipino communities, not only here, but also when we taught in the Philippines, where we ask participants, where's the hardest place that you could set your boundaries? Kind of when people ask, utang, they ask for money and it's hard for you to say no, diba? So that is a very common example that we use, or people actually demonstrate for them to be able to say no, saying no to giving or offering money.
Oh wow, yeah, that's because I'm one of those. That's like an eye opener for me now as I listen to you. Because I think it's just I at least a few seconds ago I thought it was just physical skills, but the way that you set boundaries, how would that look like? Like for example, you're walking in the subway. How would that look like? That I'm setting my boundaries.
Depends on the situation, diba? Boundaries if the subway is busy, if you're taking yung subway bus, yung TTC, and it's rush hour, it's very difficult to set a physical boundary if someone's in your face. But one thing that you could be mindful is if you have your backpack, where can you place that backpack if you want to place a physical boundary? How you position yourself where you're seating, because I know there's a lot of sexual assaults that do happen on a crowded subway station, and that is one of the ways that a lot of perpetrators would use to their advantage, is a crowded place, because a lot of people aren't really paying attention to what's going on, right? But if you're aware of these little things that we teach when we teach these kind of workshops, it would be helpful for people to know how to set physical boundaries within a crowded location.
So you can use things that you have, even like your bags and
Umbrella, newspaper.
Not yet to attack, or is
No,
it?
just for physical. Pero once it escalates, there's other options that you can do.
Is there also something about the way you project yourself that will make you less attractive to perpetrators? Is there such a thing? Like, can you have a combat face or combat energy, or don't mess with me kind of energy? Is that something that, I don't know, maybe women, teenage girls can employ? Or
Oh, definitely. I guess one thing that we teach is learning how to be assertive. And as you know, within your profession, majority of conversations or communication is through nonverbal. Although you ask a lot of questions, you could tell how a person projects themselves just the way their presence is. The way you sit, the way you walk, where you put your hands. Are you looking up or down? If you're aware of basic human behavior, then you can put yourself in a less position to be within that spectrum of where people would see you as a target.
Mm-hmm. I see that you also, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're also a Reiki practitioner.
Level one. I got my certification under level one. Under my mentor, actually, she's a Reiki master.
Mm.
So Reiki, I found helped me connect to my late Lola. She passed on a few years ago, but in her town, she would be considered one of the town faith healers. You know,
Wow.
so a lot of people would go to her, seeing some sort of treatment, just like we were talking about holistic health,
Yes.
providing herbs, manghihilot, those kind of things.
I'm very familiar with this because I grew up in that kind of environment where that was normalized. We had manghihilot. We had
Albulario.
the albolarios. Yeah, correct. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just amazed that your Lola is
Yes, she was. And
one of those people. Yeah.
she was one of those special ones that the town looked up to in Tarlac. So also growing up in that interesting environment where that thing was also normalized. Catholicism is very interesting because here they would look at it as a form of witchcraft, but Filipino tradition looked at it as cultural. So having those two different perspectives helped me appreciate it even and long to know more about that. Growing up here, she would continue that, and people within the community would find out, oh, did you know so and so is doing this and this? So then I'd have people coming over to her house visiting all the time, and I'd ask my lolo, can I see what you're doing? She's like, you're too young to understand, because she'd put yung ano.
What was she more of? An albulario or a manghihilot? Or
Both.
okay.
Both. People would go seeing her, not only for physical massage, but also for spiritual help if they found that they were being
Kulam,
possessed. Yeah.
kinukulam.
Yeah,
Oo,
she would do
oo.
those kind of works as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I found it interesting rather than being fearful of that because it was normalized within our household.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They have any, or do you remember any experience where they had to maybe hide it here because at that time was it being welcome? Is it not something that was already thought of as bogus or, as we said, witchcraft?
I guess depending yung people that you reached out to, it was normally friends of family, family's friends. So an extension of who
Our
we knew.
culture,
Oo.
yeah.
So it wasn't really something like, oh, did you know that house is doing that? No, it wasn't like that at all. So it was always great to see community coming together and looking for that connection to the Philippines that they were familiar with. I guess one example I could say was we had one close family friend who saw many different doctors, pero they could not figure out what's going on. Diba? They got blood work, x-rays, a lot of different tests. Pero when she came to see my Lola, things changed after that and her health improved drastically. So I don't know what she did, but something seemed to work. It could be a form of belief. It could be, anything. It could be a combination of both. But I think that was one thing that kind of stood out growing up and having her around, was to see that there was this holistic healing within our culture. And one thing that was pretty interesting. The more deeper I trained in the Filipino martial arts, training with some of the grandmasters that have since passed, that they too practice that as well. Because to be able to hurt people, you want to also be able to heal, right? So those two combinations work in unison when you talk about the Filipino martial arts. So it's kind of coming full circle.
It was very refreshing for me to hear because this part of the culture that I grew up in as well, and I guess a lot of people in our generation. I'm older than you, just by a few years, but I guess it's that same generation. Our lolas are the same generation, and I grew up with that kind of belief that not everything is Western medicine. In fact, that was a minority of how they would treat illnesses, and not just physical illnesses, like what you said, people used to go to your Lola for even spiritual guidance because it's all interconnected. And that was already a given when we were kids that these are all interconnected. Um, and now at in this day and age, they're going back to that. We're seeing that there are scientific proofs even of these kinds of healing, and a lot of even doctors who were educated in the Western medicine believe in that, and then there's already that certain belief or something that they saw that they couldn't explain. Why does this work? So they've started to study that side of it. It's just refreshing to hear that from another person, because something in me also feels like sometimes I can't talk about that to people who are not Filipinos because they won't understand, or they might think, it's cuckoo, it's witchcraft, it's a crazy thing. Like, what kind of family background were you raised in? But I still do this to my kids nowadays. The kind of hilot, and yeah, in fact, I'm looking for someone here in Canada who can like do those things. No, is your Lola still alive? She's still.
No, she passed away a couple of years ago. But good thing she was able to teach me some stuff before she passed on.
That's good. Were you the most interested among the siblings?
Yep.
And did you get the powers of your Lola? Like,
yeah, I guess it does pass on generation to generation, right? I think that a lot of my students, when they do get injured or, they always ask, "Oh, can you please look at this for me and see what you can do to help?" Some friends also ask me if I could help them with certain things, and I think also being able to access other forms of Eastern philosophy and medicine help, such as Reiki. Right, in Filipino holistic healing, they don't really use the term Reiki, although it is a form of energy healing that we practice within Filipino medicine.
ano ba ang Reiki?
Reiki is Japanese, right? And you also look at Chinese medicine where they look at energy points in the body and they call it chi. So it's pretty fascinating how within that part of the world they teach something similar, but it's called different.
Ano paano ang Reiki? How does it go? Energy healing?
Energy healing. So
I've heard of it before, but
you never tried
no,
it?
I've never tried it. I was supposed to have one session with a Reiki healer before, but for some reason it got canceled in the Philippines.
Yeah, Reiki is really great. And it's always good for those people who have an open mind, and just like I can see that you are. Reiki helps heal and release different energy points on your body, which they would consider, other systems call it as chakras. So there are different points on your body that tend to hold in a lot of energy, and if that's not released, it can cause illness. Right?
Like stagnation in certain energy points in your body.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you what's the method of releasing it?
Reiki would be non-touch forms of healing, because you're dealing with energy, and your energy is surrounding throughout you and in you. So there's no contact on the human body. And it's basically putting your hands on top of a person, right? Within those points on the body. So when you do that, once you're attuned is kind of what you would call opening your third eye to the universal energy. And when that happens, once you get your level 1, you're always connected, right? A lot of people who aren't tend to have certain points of the body, unless they're born with that gift that can feel different people's energies, that they can see auras. But some people, when they do get attuned in Reiki, something just opens up, because you're providing a way of healing for others who are open to receiving that universal energy. So sometimes when I do it to friends or students who ask me, "Can you please look at something?" You can feel where in their body that you feel that the energy point is kind of stagnant, and that's kind of where the energy needs to be released and healing needs to flow. And it's about that flowing energy of your body to make it, naturally. Because when things are stagnant, like I was just saying, you can feel it. Some people get headaches. Some people have issues with their heart.
How do you go about your day to day life knowing all these things that some people are not open to? For example, you see someone who obviously has energy blocks, but he doesn't believe in those things. Like you want to help him, but he just doesn't want to hear it. So I don't know. How does that employ in your day to day life? Does it, if it has any effect?
I guess it also depends on if how closely you know that person. Sometimes people set their boundaries, and you just have to respect it. I've known a lot of other people who are practitioners in these kind of energy arts. And a lot of people, like you said, are not open to it because they find it as, fluffy, foo-foo, kind of weird, basic terms. But knowing that they have options that they can talk to you if they have anything, we tend to not push it. Just like me teaching our niece or even talking about trauma. Trauma is a big thing in Filipino culture because that's kind of a taboo subject, right? And also, dealing with energy healing. So what's that coin that verse, the right vibe will attract your tribe, right? And I think that those people that are open to a lot of these avenues that are my life, then they will be attracted to it and be open to learning more about things like that.
That's good to know that you're not really bothered by it, because if they're not ready, then they're not ready. Then you don't force anything on other people. Sometimes even if you think you can help them, because it would still be really up to that person whether he's ready for that or not. It's just that it's here, it's open. If in case you need something in this realm, then you're there. The teachers are there. So
For fun, I like hiking. I love nature. I love running. I also love doing community work. That gives me the most passion and fulfillment. Seeing the ability to help those who I can help with resources that I'm connected to. Knowing that my parents were immigrants, my grandma was, and how hard it was for them to adjust to Canada. I think that was one thing that I wanted to be able to give back because, being born here and seeing the struggles of a lot of the people that are new, something that really resonated with me. My first time going to the Philippines after being a kid, I think the first time I was like 5. Tapos I went there to compete in 2010 at a international world championship competition in Cebu. That was the first time. So it was a total eye-opener. Seeing how there was different degrees of poverty, those people not impoverished but different classisms, really humbled me because I realized what my parents left behind to come here to raise us to have a better life, as they say, right? So I think the first time I got there, I landed, left the airport, and I saw children at the side of the road asking. I think I was crying. I felt like something just pulled at my heartstrings because I wasn't raised to see that as something normal. And going to where my parents were from, seeing these small towns,
in Tarlac and in Bulacan.
Tarlac and Bulacan, tapos Batangas. It broke my heart. It really totally broke my heart.
How old were you then?
I was in my 20s, early 30s, to see it for the first time after being gone for so long. And I think that image stuck deeply in my heart and in my mind, and thinking how can I make a change here in Canada to give back. And like I was saying, that was a big passion of mine, what I like to do for fun. But my fun and purpose kind of are in alignment. And then a lot of people do, mind you, I do love doing things aside, like eating nachos, watching movies. Those are my fun things too. But I think I find fulfillment and rewarding things giving back to communities. So going back to my first image of the Philippines after being gone so long, that was hard. But I think some of the work that I did back in the 90s with at HICA, And I was talking about that briefly, what Adhika was. Adhika is celebrating its 40th anniversary, and it's a nonprofit here doing community work for raising awareness, not only gender based violence, but also promoting Filipino culture and identity. And they've also do a lot of initiatives in the Philippines, like feeding programs in Cagayan as well in Siargao. But in the 90s here, when I was growing up, I came across Adhika because they were doing anti-racism youth conferences and workshops, bringing awareness towards Filipino identity and how racism exists within our culture. So I've been in touch with them growing up on and off, and life happened, but I was still in touch with them. And Tita Nora was one of the founders of Adhika. And I think after COVID, when things started opening up, we reconnected and found how we can work together after so many years. She was one of the groundbreaking people doing a lot of the work that a lot of youth kind of didn't realize that was there. So when we reconnected, we wanted to be able to do a lot of these outreach works. And her vision and mission was aligned with mine. And since then, I think a lot of the community work that we've done really fills my heart with pride to be able to give back to the community.
So what you do here reaches the Philippines.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good to be like I'm glad I met you today, that we're part of that community who wants to continue living that Filipino culture and sharing it with a lot of Filipinos who are here, whether they were born here, whether they immigrated here. There's lots, like what you said, there's lots of challenges for your parents, for who moved here. Even for those who were born here, like that's a different set of challenges as well. Trying to know your culture, right? Do you have kids of your own? Do you have your own family?
We tried, but we had losses a few years ago. My wife was pregnant, and she had a miscarriage with twin boys.
Sorry to hear about that. What's a typical day for you like?
Typical day, I guess, just like everyone, wake up, do your day job, move on, and then, nighttime, it's kind of like I switch a hat. Everyone has different roles. Everyone wears different hats, diba? So one of the things that I look for every day is promoting Filipino martial arts and culture, looking what other organizations I can collaborate with, and basically during the day, that takes up a lot of the time, because in the evenings and weekends is when I do a lot of the community work, and teaching and doing special workshops. I think that's it. Walk the dog, the cute kind of usual thing that a lot of people would have when they have like a family.
How many dogs do you have?
I have one. His name is Coco. He's a Labradoodle.
Oh,
About 65 pounds.
I used to have a golden retriever.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Who
to
was
him?
like 85 pounds. He passed away in the
Oh.
Philippines. Yeah, a long time ago. He had a heart illness.
Did
Yeah,
you
that
get
was
one?
heartbreaking.
Did you get a new one here?
Not yet.
Hindi pa.
Not yet.
Soon.
Once I get a house that would be
Fit.
comfortable for someone like him. Yeah, that's the plan. We already have the cat. So yeah, what's something about you that maybe a lot of people don't know about? Maybe even your closest friends don't know about. Is there something about JB that not a lot of people know?
One of the things on my bucket list is to hike Mount Banahaw.
Okay. Never done that either. But yeah, good luck. When are you planning to do that? Sometime in this lifetime.
Sometime in this lifetime. That's one thing that kind of like on my bucket list, to see that spiritual point of the Philippines. And I know that back then my Lola would always talk about certain caves and mountains in the Philippines hold a spiritual significance, and that would be one of the mountains that she spoke about. So that's kind of like one thing I never shared with anyone. That would mean a lot for me to go to. Yeah.
If you had the world's attention for a minute or two, what would you say? What would your message be?
Be authentic. And the right people will come and support you with your dreams. One of the things that I've realized growing up here and trying to reconnect with my roots, Filipino culture is slowly being recognized throughout the world, not only through our cuisine, which is great. I mean, Jollibee's finally being surpassing a lot of the other fried chicken restaurants, right? So I hope that one day that the next generation will continue to find who they are, especially those in the diaspora trying to reconnect with their roots. For me, Filipino martial arts is one of the main um, avenues that I help find and reconnect with who I am and who we were. But remembering that, I think that would be important for the next generation to know that there are ways to find and reconnect with that part of you that you find might be missing. Because I find that a lot of Filipinos in the diaspora now are trying to find that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It, you will find it when the time is right. The universe always provides when you're open to receiving it.
Right, right. Some might find it through
Hmm.
artworks or
Music.
reconnecting with Filipino literature.
Hmm.
There's just one uh, sad thing about Filipino literature. It's also not that well documented because we are oral storytellers,
That's
right?
right.
That's why I guess one thing also that's good for us to realize is that we should continue the stories that our lolas used to tell us. Tell your
Mm.
children about that. Tell your grandchildren about
Mhm.
that. Tell your friends about that, especially friends who are not Filipinos. Because that's how, there's not a lot of it in the libraries, there's not a lot of it in the internet, even.
Mm.
But don't let those stories die. That was how we used to pass it on.
Mm.
How I'm seeing Filipino martial arts in a way is each of us, like some people will say, I'm not into martial arts. It's not what I do. Maybe I'm into sports or maybe I'm into other things, but I'm not into martial arts. But just a basic knowledge of it, I think, would be good because it's just like CPR, or it's something that at least I would like to learn for myself, even just for the basics. I also have daughters who I want them to know how to defend themselves, and not just in the physical way. I learned from you today. There are other things, trusting your instincts and setting your boundaries, using physical things that you have right now or things in your environment to be able to protect yourself.
Mhm.
Because the era should be done when we are pushed over
Mhm.
and the colonization time is over, but there are still certain things in our mentality that allows us to be victims, that things are that are within our control to
Mhm.
stop that. So I think a basic knowledge of Filipino martial arts would be beneficial to us Filipinos, even if we don't feel like continuing it or going into the black belt or whatever the
Mhm.
rankings are, but just to know that arnis is not just the stick. Arnis can also be done with bare hands, with whatever, newspapers and all that. Because this is a basic knowledge of our culture. And even that basic knowledge, I think, will enrich us a lot. No? You
Oh,
think?
completely. Yes. And I think one thing that a lot of people that are curious about martial arts but have that misconception that it's a bunch of very hunky guys, macho male teaching it, and that causes that certain apprehension and fear to
Mm.
want to learn because they have that visualization that our nieces at that level that you see in the media. You look it up on YouTube, you look it up Facebook, Instagram, you type in Filipino martial arts, and you see a lot of people teaching it in that certain way. And also, it depends on how the instructor teaches it and how open they are in the different diverse communities that they teach. Our school is quite different, where we teach intergenerational groups and people of all diverse abilities and genders, right? We're not strictly focused on, uh, you know, adult males between 18 to like 45 that are in the prime of their health, right? But we want to be able to teach kids as young as 8 to seniors who want to do something in their 70s to people of different abilities and physical challenges, right? Women, girls, who want to know how to defend themselves but don't want to be feeling intimidated by a school that solely focuses on hardcore physical techniques, right? To be flexible is one thing that our school always wants to be able to show, that you don't have to be within a certain criteria to be able to train in the Filipino martial arts, because martial arts can also be seen in a negative context for people wanting to know but are afraid to ask, right?
That's very refreshing to know.
Mm.
Like, exactly, until you said that, I didn't know that was what was on my mind. Like, martial arts is only for physically abled people at a certain age group, because this is the age where you are physically strong and able in your lifetime. But yeah, why not seniors, 70 years old, or kids? That is very refreshing to know. So if only we were able to impart that message for this particular podcast, I'll be happy with that already. Plus, when you mentioned earlier about size, it's another misconception I'm realizing, and it's good for us Filipinos to know this, because we are not exactly height endowed. And I just realized, well, not just like today, but like lately in my later part of my life, that height is not a determinant of strength. Definitely not. We had crazy badass what do you call this, warriors who were less than 5 feet tall, the Aitas, who were feared by the colonizers, who were like hanging pugot na ulo, cut off heads of their the ones who attacked them and tried to grab their lands, and they display the heads of those people that they beheaded, were less than 5 feet tall. They were in their bahag, and they had all these badass weapons that they did with their hands versus people who had guns. We should know that. We should know that we can beat people even if we're physically near the 5 feet height, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good point to make. Because I think that a lot of people don't realize that you don't have to be that big or strong, or doing bodybuilding to be able to do Filipino martial arts. Although we do teach weapons, it's not the typical ones that you see where for example, Muay Thai, they kick each other's shins. They do a lot of hardcore conditioning. There is certain conditioning drills that you do in the Filipino martial arts. But for beginners and people just learning it, our school doesn't throw you in the fire for you to like just try to figure it out on your own. Because we want to make sure that people learn safely, and that's an important thing, and adapt the skills to their body type. One size does not fit all, right? And that's what we want to make sure that everyone's able to learn within their own skill and ability.
JB, it was a pleasure talking to you today. If there's anything else, you want to impart before I let you go?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. An honor to meet you. I know who you are before you introduced yourself, so it's so great to finally meet you in person. And I hope that what our conversation today is able to touch people who's trying to find themselves and learn more about our Filipino culture. So thank you for having me, and I guess what an honor.
Thank you. That's a lot of people who trying to find themselves, like even in different stages of their lives. Okay, that ends our podcast for today, and it was really just a great conversation I had with JB. We'll see you again next week.